Let's get going. Put on your walking shoes and let's crank.
All right.
Okay, first, let's define what a historic home is. And per the city rules, if you will, right now, a historic home is anything that's over 50 years old. And that causes a lot of problems because a lot of the tract houses now are 50 years old or getting awful close to it. And let's see, because of their architecture, we might be interested in them. Also, if something happened, like important documents were signed, or let's see, what else? Well, mainly important documents were signed in the home. It might be of interest, but more importantly, is the house associated with anybody that was significant to the history of Livermore. Okay, let's move on. And one of the things that we have done then at the Heritage Preservation Commission is to award plaques then to some of these houses that for one reason or another meet the criteria we just talked about. The last plaque that was given by the Heritage Preservation Commission was in August of 2018. So you can see they're not given out very often. And this is a typical plaque. And what you'll see then is the person of importance that lived in the house, when the house was built, and what kind of architectural style it is. And then a little bit about the history of the person. And then this plaque is a little bit unusual in that it also mentions the person that's living in the house right now, mainly because of Mary Rasmussen was a direct descendant then of the Fallon and Murray families, which were so important in the early history of the valley. Okay, next I want to show you, whoops, back up. I want to show you where we're going. We're going to start, is that showing up on the screen, my cursor?
Yes, it is.
Can you see the cursor at all?
Yeah, we can.
Oh,
okay. Yeah. So we're going to start at the Carnegie Park, and then we're going to go down J Street, just a block, and then look at some buildings on the corner. And then we're going to go all the way down to L Street. And then we're going to talk about a number of houses along L. And we're going to get almost to the Arroyo and talk about some very important houses there. Then we'll go back to College. And there's some interesting houses right here. And then we'll go all the way back down K Street, back to the Carnegie building. Okay, now we start all our walks then at the Carnegie Library, and take a good look at this picture. It's pretty up to date. I took it, I think early this spring, and I talked about plaques. Look on the building, and you can see on the entryway, there's 4 plaques here, which is very unusual. Most buildings have 1 plaque, but this one has 4. And so again, when you're walking either downtown or by historic houses, buildings, look and see if they have a plaque, because there'll always be a little bit of history then. Okay, now the next picture shows the Carnegie building before it was finished. And I think this is around 1910, best I can tell. And you notice that the fountain has not been put in front. And also there's a set of steps from the existing steps shown in this picture that go down to the fountain. And you can see there's kind of a real steep bank there. This land was very flat. And then the building was built. And then dirt was pushed up around the outside then to make the mound that goes around the Carnegie building as we see it now. This was at least the second, it might have even been the third library in town. And it almost didn't get built here. A lot of people didn't want it here for a couple reasons. One reason was that this whole block at one time was a stockyard. And people thought, oh, we don't want to build a library in a stockyard. And so that was a negative. Then another negative that I read about in one of the newspapers is they're arguing about where to put the library, was that it was too far from downtown. And of course, we wouldn't even think of that these days, but that apparently was a real concern to some of the people. Okay, here's one of the plaques then that, whoops, I don't know why this is bouncing around here. That's there. This is one of the plaques then that's on the front by the front door. And again, it talks about a little bit of history. The building was opened in 1911 and continued as our city library until 1966, when the library was built at the corner of South Livermore and Pacific. And of course, that building was taken down, and now a new building, the city meeting hall, has been built there. Okay, let's start walking. And the first house we're going to look at is at the corner then of 4th Street and J. And that was the home of Charles Edson Beck, who was born in 1870 in Ohio and died here in town in 1923. And he was married in 1893 at the Asbury Methodist Church to Mary Luella Inman, who was born 1867 here in California. Now, what's interesting is her father was Daniel Inman, who was a very successful businessman. And he was also known as the founder of the town of Danville. Now, Charles Beck was a grocerman and hardware store man. And at one time, he owned one of the biggest companies in town, the Livermore Commercial Company. He was also a town trustee. Okay, let's cross the street now. And we're going to look at
Richard,
a little church.
Hey, Richard,
Pardon?
I have a quick question. From
Yes.
Molly, what is the significance of the 3 other plaques on the Carnegie Library?
They're all a little bit of history, and the plaques were donated by different organizations in town. And we're making a little plug here. We're writing a book that hopefully will be out this coming year. We've been working on it for several years, and it's going to list all the plaques in town and have pictures of them and a brief history then of each of the plaques. So let's see. So let's look at this little church. Right now, it's the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. Take a good look at that, and let's see what it looked like in 1902. I roll this up, and do you recognize it at all? So 1902, it was built as a mission church for the Episcopal Church. It was called Grace Episcopal Church. They bought the land in January of 1901 for the princely sum of $240. And then the church was built in 1902. Some of the prominent members were the Wagners, the Mess, Malley, Burnell, and Barker families. All these names are very important to the history of Livermore. The church was closed in 1936 because of insufficient membership and income. And then over the years, then it's been a church for many different denominations. Okay, let's go to one of my favorite houses across the street from the church. And that is this little house. And you can see, like a lot of the houses, they were smallish to start with and square. Most of them had 4 rooms. And you can see off to the left of the photograph that the house has been added onto. And that's true with many of the historic houses in town. Okay, this house was the home of George Vanessa Taylor, who was born in 1857 here in California. But other records say he was born in Michigan, so it's very confusing. He was married in 1883 here in Livermore to Susan Morrell. Morrell is another old-time name. Okay, George was a farm worker, a deputy sheriff, a town marshal, and a mail carrier. The next owner, who bought the property in 1906, was Thomas Matthew Tui. He was born in 1868 here in Livermore and died in 1957 here in Livermore. And he was married to Elizabeth Veronica Dolan, who was also born here in the Valley, 1868 near Dublin, and died in 1951 in Livermore. Now Thomas has left a mark that we can still see today. He was a concrete contractor, and many of the old sidewalks in Livermore, especially on the south side, have a stamp from his concrete company. And some of you may know Jay Morris. Jay has walked a good part of Livermore, and he's found over 80 just in the south side of these concrete contractor stamps. And here's one that you may have seen. Whoop, doggone it. That here's a Tui stamp. Again, it's really hard to see. Most of these are faded out. And unfortunately, many of these stamps were right at the corner. And so as the city has put in ramps, these have been destroyed. They're gone. And it's too bad they weren't chiseled out and kept at least the stamp. But this one, probably a lot of you have walked on it and maybe not even seen it. I know I've been by it many times. And then on our last walk, somebody pointed it out, and there it was. And this is right at the north, let's see, what is that? The northeast corner of 4th and K Street, right by Carnegie Park. So anyway, there's lots of these. So when you're walking around, especially in the south side of town, look for these marks. Again, a lot of them were at the corners. They're gone now, but there's still lots and lots of them. Did we have any question on the other house there?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, we'll move on then to the next house. We're walking down 5th Street now, and we stopped then at K and 5th. And this is the home of Harold Anderson, who was born 1901 here in California. He was married to Anna Amelia Fennon. Now, Fennon is another very important name in the history of Livermore. And there's a number of old buildings that were owned by Fennons, and many of them are in really good shape. This one does not have a plaque. It was given a plaque, but for some reason, it was not affixed to the property. Okay, Harold was the manager of a service station. He was a merchant here in town, and at one time he was the mayor. Okay, now the next building you'll all recognize, and that's the Veterans Building on at the corner of 5th and South L. And this is, to me, kind of a really interesting building. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. And you notice on the left side, there are a number of plaques, or bricks rather, that are somewhat like plaques, I guess. Number of bricks that are in honor then of veterans who at one time or another lived in Livermore or associated with Livermore in one way or another. Okay, the next picture is going to show what it looked like when it was built. And oh, I didn't write that down. It was built anyway in the 1930s, as I remember right. And it was designed by Henry Height Myers, who was a really well-known California architect who designed many of the San Francisco skyscrapers, retail stores, factories, and warehouses, not only in San Francisco, but all over the Bay Area after the 1906 earthquake. He designed 10 veterans memorial buildings and a number of healthcare facilities, including Highland Hospital. Okay, across the street from the Veterans Building.
Richard, we have a quick question on the
Oh,
Veterans Building.
yes, okay.
Were the bricks donated or purchased to honor specific veterans?
People paid for them. And when you're there, look at them. You'll recognize many, many, many names of people that we all know. Unfortunately, a while back, there was some really bad vandalism, but that's been repaired. And why anybody would do that, I have no clue. But
if someone
goodness
wanted to add a brick, are they all the spots taken, or do they still accept them?
I think there's still blank bricks. So I think a person could contact LARPD. They manage the facility. So I'm not sure, David, who at the LARPD they talked to, but I would guess the receptionist could aim them to the right person.
If anyone's interested, just email me and I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, super. Okay, across the street then is this house built in 1885 for a fellow named Launmeister. And he was married to one of the Burnell girls. And you know that Burnell's owned a good part of the valley at one time or another. Okay, Anton owned a flour mill. And he also was a baker at different times. And let's see, his wife then, Delphinia, was a daughter of the early pioneer Francisco Burnell, who lived from 1835 to 1860. Now, the second owner was a fellow named Giovanetti, and I can't find much about him. The only person that I can find that makes any sense was a man from Napa County who lived here for a short while and was a baker in Napa. So he might have been the one that owned it. And then the next owner, maybe of more interest to us, was Dr. Wallace Longfellow Myers, who was born 1881. And he was part of the Myers family. Again, he was a brother then to Henry H. Myers, the architect. And you'll notice as we go along L Street, South L, that many of the houses between 5th and 6th Street were either owned by or built by the Myers. Okay, now this house we think was remodeled when Dr. Myers moved in, and that was, he bought the property in 1912. So when he moved in, we think that his brother Henry redesigned this house, because obviously it does not look like an 1885 house, and it does look like an early 1900s house. Now, what I don't show in this picture, and we get to see when we do the walk, if you go up the ramp, as soon as you get to the ramp, you'll see there's a door right in front, but it has a chair in front of it. You think, well, that's kind of strange. Why would they put a chair in front of the door? But if you turn to the right, there's another door. And we found out that the main big doors were used by the family and their friends, but a smaller door, usually off the porch, was for the office of the doctor. And we'll see that in several houses that we look at today. And as you walk around town, buildings that are were homes then of the doctors. You'll see the same thing. You'll see a big door, an impressive door, and a smaller door that went into the offices. See, anything on that, David?
No, no questions.
Okay, we'll move on. So next door then is the Roy Bernard house, and this dates from 1925. And this was built by Samuel Bothwell. Now, a lot of you know the Bothwell Center on 8th Street. We used to call it the Senior Center, and that was built by Bothwell's father. But this Bothwell also was a contractor, and he was also in the city council for many years. And the Bernard owned a blacksmith shop, and at one time was the mayor of Livermore. So you see a lot of these houses, these bigger houses, were owned by people either were on the city council or were mayors. Okay, the next house is kind of a real fun house, and that is the Thomas Knox house on L Street, and this was built in 1898. And this is said to have been the first stucco house built in Livermore. And a lot of you remember Gary Drummond, who was the first city historian. Gary lived in this house with his wife, Vanessa. And let's see, Thomas was born in 1855 in Canada, and he died in 1938 in Oakland. And he had a long list of occupations, and I'm going to go through them really fast. He was a vineyard owner, he was a contractor, a plasterer, a cement mason, including many sidewalks, some of which had his stamp. He was also a postmaster, the county tax collector. He was the chairman of the Livermore Cornet Band. He was chair of the board of town trustees. And in 1905, he was the one that accepted the flagpole that was put up at the corner of First and Lizzie Street in those days. And he also was the mayor. He was the county chimney inspector. And he was a Livermore Union High School trustee. He was a secretary of the Livermore Mutual Building and Loan Association. And he was a county supervisor, among other things. Now, what's really neat about this house is look at the texturing on the front, and then look at the texturing on the on our right side. You can see it's much different. And if you could walk around the house and look on the left side, you see that that's even different. And we were told then that Tom Knoxian used this house then kind of as a sample for people to see what kind of stucco work that he could do. So it's a really, really neat house. And, you know, certainly one that stands out. Oh, and one thing I might point out, most of the plaques that we see are either on a pillar or a post at the top of the stairs or right by the front door. This one's a little bit different. So when you're walking around, the plaque for this house is in the concrete right near the front sidewalk. Okay, moving on. Okay, this is across the street. And, oh, do we have something?
No, I don't see anything.
No questions,
okay.
but just a quick comment that, you know, if you don't have a smartphone, you can have 12 different jobs. If you're not distracted, you got plenty of time.
Very good. Okay, across the street was the Oscar William Myers house. And guess who he was a brother of? And he was another brother of Harry Myers, the architect. He was born in 1869 here in California and died in 1942 in Kern County. And he was a contractor. and also was a builder and a carpenter. And it's believed that he built this house. We don't know that for sure, but we think he did. And we think it was designed by his brother. Now, some people ask if this Oscar Myers had anything to do with the hot dog business, and we don't think so at all. Now, from 1905 to 1956, this was the Presbyterian manse. That is the home of the minister. This house is in really great shape. And you can see to the left of the steps on the pillar, on the brick pillar, there's a plaque. And if you look carefully, you're going to see plaques on many of the houses that we're pointing out today. Okay, across the street is a really impressive house. And this is the William Harvey Taylor House. William was born in 1870 and he died in 1916. Now, he was married to Lily Mary Myers, and guess who she was the sister of? Good old Harry Myers. And she was born in 1876 here in Livermore and died in 1953. Okay, William Taylor started in the business world as a clerk for the Anspacher brothers. And at one time, he owned the W.H. Taylor Company, which was a mercantile business. And he had stores along First Street. And it's said by some that he was the first person in Livermore to sell automobiles. Okay, as I pointed out, Lily was the sister of Oscar and Henry and the good doctor. And her father was Jacob Franklin Myers, who built many homes, barns, and wineries here in Livermore. And this house was said to be a gift then to William and Lily, either from the father or from brother Harry. We think, or Henry rather, we think right now it probably was a gift from the father, because he was pretty well off. This is a really impressive house. Now, I got some pictures of days of old. Now, this picture we think was taken right after the house was finished, and you notice the bay windows and the trim above the front steps there. All that is still there. The only thing that's not there anymore is the fencing. And over the years, that changed a couple times. You can see in the next picture that, and we think this was probably in the 1920s or 30s. You can see the fence has already changed, but the rest of the house looks very, very much the same. Yeah, really great house. Now, one of the neat things too, when we do the actual walking tours, sometimes people come out and ask why a whole bunch of us are stopped in front of their house. And this was one house that people did that. A lady came out, and turns out that she told us some detail about the house that we didn't know. So pretty neat. Okay, let's go across the street again.
Richard, is the balcony on that house an actual balcony, or is it just decorative?
Well, you could stand on it, I guess, but to get to it, you have to open the window and step through the window. There's no door to it. Okay, across the street is the John Wilson house. He was born in England in 1874, and he was a coal miner out at Tesla. You may know at one time Tesla is said to have been had a larger population than Livermore when they were doing a lot of coal mining out there. After the 1906 earthquake destroyed much of Tesla, Ben Wilson moved here to town and became a co-owner with a fellow named Mitchell. And we're going to see his house in just a bit of of a coal dealership, a drayman, a trucking company, and a coal dealership. And they owned the California Transfer Company, and later owned a building supply company. Okay, this house and many of the great old houses in Livermore were built by Carl Herman Rasmussen, who was a Livermore contractor. And again, this Rasmussen built many of the houses. Okay, and you see the plaque again right by the front steps. Okay, next to that is the Charles Gabriel Owens house. He's built in 1883 here in California, died in 1959 here in California. He was married to Margaret Callahan. Now, Callahan's a super important family here in Livermore. Okay, Charles was a fireman, a farmer, and he was a partner with Flynn in the sheep raising stockman. And he also was a founder, one of the founders of the Livermore Rodeo. Now, Margaret was the daughter of John Callahan, who was born 1838, died 1905 in the Tesla Hospital. And who knew that Tesla had a hospital? And then let's see. Oh, let's see. Margaret's mother was Margaret Moy, and now Moy again, a very important name here in the town. But again, look at these houses; they're just in really great shape. Okay, the next house is the Mitchell house. Then is owned by William Albert Mitchell, born 1870 in Iowa, died in 1946 in Santa Cruz. And he was married to Claudia Twisselman. And Twisselman, another old Livermore family, very important. And as we said before, this fellow and our friend down the street, Mr. Wilson, owned a coal company and trucking company. Let's see. Okay, this house too was built by Carl Rasmussen. Okay, the next house, we're going back across the street now. The next house was the Alan Lloyd Thomas house, and he was born in Wales in 1853 and died down in Templeton. The family had packed up and they had all moved to Templeton, and I can't remember what year, but they did live in this house for some time, then moved down there. Okay, Alan Thomas was a farmer at one time, but in Livermore, he spent most of his time as a sewing machine salesman for the Singer Sewing Machine Company, and also a company I hadn't heard of called Wheeler and Wilson Sewing Machines. And we got a query, you know, I said we get a lot of queries as the city historian, either from the library or from Heritage Guild, or people somehow just are given my name. And one of the interesting ones was from a lady who is the direct descendant then of Alan Thompson. And she sent me this picture of the house, and it's kind of neat. Look, the fence is broken out so you can see there's a girl sitting on the porch. And we cannot figure out who that little girl is at all. But it's really neat to have these pictures. So if anybody listening has pictures of old houses in Livermore, if they could get them to us, we'd really appreciate that. Okay, the next house, really a great house, is was the home of one of the most successful businessmen in Livermore, and that was Dennis Burnell, rather, who was born in 1856 in Pleasanton, died in 1949 here in Livermore. Now, he was married to Josephine Bailey, and the Baileys were another old-time family. At one time, Dennis owned a number of Livermore businesses, and he was a developer of the town's power, light, and water system. He owned a flour mill. He was the Livermore police chief of police, and was the civic leader. He owned the Livermore Brewery. You know, down on First Street, in front of the yogurt store, there's it says a brewery right in the sidewalk, and that's where his brewery was. And he claims to have had the purest and best beer in the entire United States made at his brewery. Let's see, he owned the Livermore Water and Power Company, which he sold to PG&E in 1903. And he's the one that gave the light bulb to the firehouse in 1901. You know, the light bulb that's still burning at the firehouse on East Avenue. Now, his ancestors can be traced back to many of the early Spanish California families, not only Burnells, but also Felix, Castro, and Sanchez. His father, Juan Pablo Burnell, was a grantee of Rancho El Valle de San Jose, which was a good part of the valley. Let's see. Dennis, let's see. Well, his wife, Josephine, was a daughter of Hiram Bailey. Now, Bailey is another very, very important name. This Hiram was a carpenter, butcher, cattle dealer, and a farmer, as well as a county supervisor. And he also descended then from many of the old families. And then the last Burnell that lived in that house was Ruth Frances Burnell. And she was married to John Francis McGlinchey. McGlinchey, another old name that is well known. Okay, and the people that own it now have done a really great job. And you can see in the back, if you drive by right now, in the back, they're restoring the barn. And I don't know how old that barn is, but I think it must predate the house. It looks like it goes way back.
Richard, we have a question from Lisa asking if Tesla was an incorporated town, and is it related at all to the Tesla manufacturer in Fremont?
No, it's nothing to do with Tesla cars. It was named, I understand, after Tesla, Nicholas Tesla, who was a great inventor, who did a lot of work and apparently was just super smart. But he and Edison had some real problems. And Edison, according to some stories, ran him out of business. The town, as far as I know, was not incorporated. There were several coal towns in that area. Let's see, Harrisville. Let's see, I can't remember some of the others. Right at the bottom of the grade, when you go into the little valley where Tesla is, in Carnegie, there were several coal mining towns, and Tesla by far was the biggest one. Then there was a big flood, I think around 1915, that wiped out the town, and then by then their coal wasn't profitable. It was the first coal mining operation in California, from what I understand.
And there's another question from Molly, wondering, when you have a historic home like that, do you need special permission to make improvements? Yes.
The bottom line, it has to go, from what I understand, I may be wrong, but from what I understand, if you have a historic home, and again, this is really any home over 50 years old. If the city decides, the city staff decides it might be historic, they take it to the Historic Preservation Commission, and they make a determination if the house, for whatever reason, remember we said there's 3 criteria, for whatever reason, if the house is historic, then some talk has to go on what kind of modifications are allowed. And most of the houses, they've kept the exterior as it was when it was built in the early years.
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay, the next house is probably the oldest house in Livermore. And I don't know of a house older than this. We don't know exactly when this house was built. We do know it was the home of Thomas Hart, who was born in 1829 in New York, and died 1870. In 1857 in Pleasanton, he married a lady named Ellen Johnson. Now, Thomas was a vaquero for Robert Livermore. So this shows how far back he goes. And he owned a place called the Halfway House, which was, best I can figure out, was right across the road from the pumpkin patch that's out by the freeway, the Gandolfo property. Across the road from them, there's a whole bunch of eucalyptus trees, and the arroyo goes right by there. In 1862, there was a huge flood that wiped out the Halfway House and completely destroyed it. And so after that, sometime, Thomas moved to town. Now, the question is, did he build this house after he moved to town, which would have been around 1865, or did his wife, according to another story, his wife built it, his widow built it in 1875. So, we don't know for sure. Now, one of the things I just saw listed was that in 1867, he was a farmer. And around that same time, it's reported that he sold 680 acres of the Rancho de Valle de San Jose to William Mendenhall. And it's not clear how Hart got the land, but it's this land then, the 680 acres, that Mendenhall then developed into the town of Livermore in 1869. So this building is very, very important. And again, you can see it was a fairly small house to start with, but it's been added on to several times. And again, as far as I know, this probably is the oldest house in Livermore. Now, the house we get asked more questions about than any others is this house that goes by a couple names. Some people call it the Twin Palms. Other people call it the Anspacher House. We know this house, according to the newspaper of the time, was built for $5,000, which was a huge amount of money in those days, 1888. The house was built for William Anspacher, who was a son then of Anspacher, who owned all kinds of warehouses along the railroad tracks and had a number of stores, not only here in Livermore, but in San Francisco. Now, Philip never lived in this house. I don't know if he gave it to or sold it to his sister, Emma, and she was married to a fellow named Samuel Seller. And Sellers then was a manager for Anspacher Company, Anspacher Brothers, in their hay, grain, and lumber business. So a really, really big house, probably the biggest house in town, except for maybe the Mendenhall mansion, which was across the street and down a little bit. Okay, the next house is across the street, and this is the William Stewart Taylor House. William was born in 1847 in Pennsylvania, died in 1931 in Oakland. Now, he was a valley physician for 46 years and was way ahead of his time. He had his own bacteriological laboratory when it said that many medical schools didn't even have them. He owned the first car in the valley in 1903, Haynes Apperson, and he was written up in the newspaper for his fast driving. He was accused of driving at the unheard of speed of 30 miles an hour in town, which was really a no-no, I guess. William and his wife Martha, and all of their children except one were buried at the Oak Knoll Cemetery. And as far as I can tell, William was the last one buried there. Now, let's look at this house again. And the front door, if you can see the cursor moving, the front door is over here, a big front door. There's a small side door over here. And this apparently then was Dr. Taylor's office in this area. Okay, this house originally was at the corner of 4th and South L, kitty corner from the Presbyterian Church. Now there's some offices on that corner. Okay, down L Street just a bit is Dr. Jensen's. Whoops.
Before you go, Richard,
Yes.
we have a question about what business was the Ansbacher in to afford the $5,000 home? And is another question, is the house still a single family home, or are there multiple units now?
No, it's apparently it's an apartment house. When you look at the side of it, there's a number of PG&E gas meters.
Okay.
So it looks like it's been divided up into, I forget how many meters, but 4 or 5 meters, I think, are on the side of the house.
Okay.
So the Ansbachers were in the wholesale and retail hay and grain business. And that's why they had a number of very, very large warehouses along the railroad tracks. They also had retail stores, general stores here in town and in San Francisco. So very, very successful. I just found out a kind of a side note of interest, at least to me, was that where I live here on Mines Road, the Ansbachers own that property too. And so they bought and sold property all over the place. Okay, let's go down to Dr. Jensen's house then. And this is probably one of the newest houses that we'll look at, a 1934 house. Dr. Jensen at one time was the superintendent of the Livermore Sanitarium. And next, let's see, 2 houses down from him, a 1935 house. And this was the house built for Dr. John Robertson, who was the son of John Robertson, Dr. John Robertson, who built and founded the Livermore Sanitarium. And this Dr. Robertson was born in 1902 here in Livermore, died 1987 in Monterey. Let's see, his father then, Dr. John Worcester Robertson, was born 1856 in Alabama and died 1941 here in Alameda County. And he was internationally known as a psychiatrist and was way, way ahead of his time as far as psychiatry and the treatment of mental problems and also drug problems go. Oh, let's look at this house. Here's the front door. Here's the front door. And guess what's over here? The door to his office.
Mm-hmm.
So his office was over here. And again, a prominent front door, a not so prominent door to the office. And Lynn Tobin, many of you know Lynn Tobin. She was a daughter then of the second John Robertson, and she lived there for quite a while, and now is over at Stone Ridge Creek. And her daughter then is living here, and they're working on a book, and I hope it gets to print, because I know I'll be very interested. They're working on a book about the history then of the whole sanitarium. You know, it was a huge operation. So there was the history of the sanitarium, and also how Dr. Robertson changed the whole way mental folks were treated.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops. Okay, next door is this house, which started out was not a house at all. It was the women's dormitory for the Livermore Sanitarium. Now it was down farther, and it was moved then along the arroyo by the present owners, who've done just a tremendous job fixing this house up. And the original part, the middle part, was built in 1894. Isn't that something? 1894. And it was used as the women's dormitory until 1964. And it was used to treat women for alcoholism, drugs, and mental problems. Now, on the sanitarium, there were 17 buildings, and they had a staff of around 300. And it said they were the largest employer in the Livermore Valley. And it was kind of like a city within a city. They had their own water system, their own laundry company system, their own steam plant, their own greenhouse, their own farm animals. And where Robinson Park is now, that was all part of the property. And they ran animals in that area. After the sanitarium was closed, the building then was used as the administration building for the Pentecostal Bible College from 1965 to 1978. And we've been really, really lucky to, on our walks, to be able to go in the house and be given a tour. It's just a really fascinating house. And I don't know if you can see very well, but you look at the windows, and those are actually bars. And all the doors inside the building are locked. You go into a room you can't get out unless somebody opens the door from the outside. So this was really a secure place at one time. Okay, we have a picture of it when it was on the site, the original site. And you see the center part is very much the same. What's interesting, right above here, there's a glass window, leaded glass window. And that was not taken out when they moved the building along the creek. And not one single pane was broken. So hopefully we'll get to visit that house again. A lot of interesting stories there.
Richard, why did they end up moving it? I remember the owner told the story when we took the tour, but I can't recall it off the top of my head.
Well, it was going to be destroyed, I guess. And almost everything in the old sanitarium grounds, everything was leveled. And that's where what do they call it now? Forest Glades houses are. So what's that? West of L Street, and then south of College, that whole area in there, all the way down to the county firehouse. And so to save the house, then they picked it up and moved it. And just a tremendous job. Oh, I can't even imagine doing something like that.
Did they do it all in one piece, or did they move it in chunks?
I think in one piece.
I don't know how you would do
in one piece.
If I recall, it seems like Mrs. Tobin, when we toured the house, said it took, I want to say at least weeks, or was it months, to get it moved through the arroyo up to.
Yeah, it was a huge job. Huge job. And I think they did it all by themselves.
Yeah, I can't remember where they rolling logs in front of it and then just replacing.
Well, I think he said he got I don't know what they're called, but mules or tractors that they pull the airplanes with at the airport. You know, those little tractors that pull airplanes.
Yeah.
I think he got some of those, if I remember right. Oh. And then use those to pull. Okay. Be interesting again. Now they're talking about writing the book too, and I sure hope they do.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting history, and they found up in the attic the original plans for the building. They go way back to the 1800s. So I mean, a lot of history, and again, hopefully a book can be written about that. Super nice people, and done a great job. Okay, we got to get going. We got a lot of houses to see yet.
Quick question
Yeah.
from Stan. What happened to the section on the far left? It looks like it's not currently attached.
Yeah, excuse me. I think some of it was demolished.
Oh,
It was just so big. You know, the house as it is now, and maybe you remember, but it's 20 something rooms just as it is now.
Yeah.
And so with those other wings, gosh, I don't know how many rooms they had, but it had to be absolutely tremendous.
Yeah.
Okay, across the street is the church. And when you stand on the corner, looking, what would that be? Kind of southeast, you can see a row of palm trees. Okay, those palm trees actually were on the sides of a road that went in there. And you say, well, where did that road go? Well, I gave you a hint. It went to the sanitarium. And whoops, went the wrong way here. And at the end of that road was this huge, huge building, which was the hydropathic building. And it was one, remember we said there were 17 large buildings on the property. This was probably the largest building, just a big, big building. And that was torn down in 1965. And I was in town way before that. And I have to say, I don't remember that building at all. So I guess it was so far off the road. And anyway, it was just nothing that I remember at all. But looking at the pictures that Lynn Tobin let me borrow, that wow, there were some really, really impressive buildings. And so this is the biggest one where they used hydro shock then. Okay, now what's interesting, right in the corner of South L and College, there's this big plaque in the ground, in the sidewalk. And there's, as far as I can tell, there's only two large plaques like this. One here, and then the other one is at L and First Street, where the Old Valley Hotel was. There's a big plaque like this. Otherwise, the plaques are a lot smaller. And so this plaque then gives a little history then of the hydropathic building. Okay, let's walk down College now. And on the last trip that we were on, a lady said, what do you know about the house across the street? And I said, I don't know anything about that house. And she said, well, her good friend owns that. And that is a Sears kit house. And so I talked to the owner, and she believes it is. And I don't think we've been able to prove so far that it is. But, and I did purchase two old copies of Sears catalogs. And I couldn't find pictures of houses that look like this, unfortunately. But then I found out when you go online, there's a lot of information about Sears kit houses. Turns out there were over 400 models at one time or another. And they started in 1908 and they ran all the way until the war started, 1939 is when the last ones were built. And they said the kits could weigh 25 tons. They had up to 30,000 pre-cut parts, and you might get 750 pounds of nails. Now, these houses, from what I can read, if you could go in them, either, and a lot of them have basements, but if you go in the basement or the attic, apparently a lot of the boards are numbered. They had big ink stamps on. So it's kind of like a IKEA kit. They, you put this here and you put that there, and pretty soon, after a couple of months, you have a house. So a huge amount of work. And I don't know how people would get 25 tons of material from the train tracks up to their site. But now some people are telling me that they think there's more kid houses on College. Haven't been able to verify that. Across where the totem pole is on South Street or South S Street, some of those houses are said to be kid houses. Also on Park Street, on P Street, and at least a couple on McLeod Street are said to be. And so we've got to research that a whole lot better than what we've done. To me, that's pretty exciting if these are really kid houses. Now, the Sears houses were all built in the East Coast. So to ship them out here would have been tremendously expensive. Well, we did find out there was a large kit house factory down in Los Angeles. And so maybe some of them came from that company. Okay, the next house. And this is a little bit farther. And actually, we didn't go to this on our 2 walks. I think we might next time. And this house, again, this is a real old one, 1876. But again, you can see it's added on to quite a bit. This house was owned by Jesse Bowles and his wife, Martha Mendenhall. And she was a sister of William Mendenhall, who laid out the town of Livermore. This house is said to originally have been at the corner of South L and College, and then was moved down here. I'm not sure when, perhaps when the sanitarium was built, I'm not sure. Interesting thing about Jesse Bowles, he was the first person to grow tobacco in the Contra Costa County. Who would have guessed that? But it turns out that tobacco is also grown here in the Livermore Valley. The next, I always thought this house looked kind of like a Wells Fargo stagecoach stop.
Hey, Richard, there was a question back on the sanitarium about what hydropathic treatment was.
I wish my wife was in the room. She was a nurse. She could tell you. Apparently, water was, and I may have this all wrong. You'll have to Google it, but it's my understanding water was shot at pressure on the people, and somehow that was supposed to calm them. And to me, it drive me crazy if I wasn't already. But yeah, you better Google it. I'm probably giving you the wrong story. Okay, let's go down K Street now. And one of the houses we're going to stop at in front of an 1897 house from Julius Jacobs. And now he was married to one of the Reimer girls, and Reimer is another very, very important name in Livermore. Julius was a manufacturer of soda. There were several. Anderson's was another name. There were several little Livermore was a tiny town, so why there were several breweries and several soda works, I don't know. But Julius owned one. He met a really terrible death down in Santa Cruz. There was an explosion. He had moved down there, and the boiler exploded, I understand, and he was killed. He was married then to Mrs. Reimers in 1896 in the Presbyterian Church. Oh, and the builder of this was another old-time builder, and you see his name on a lot of houses, Weymouth, another old-time guy. And again, look at all the work. Look at the top, along the top here, kind of hidden by the trees, and along here, tremendous amount of work that they did on these old houses in the late 1800s. And then, guess what happens? They moved to 1900, and I guess that was considered very old-fashioned because, well, here's a 1924 house, but we have some houses before that we'll look at that they're very plain compared to these older houses. So I don't know if the cost of labor went up that much or people just didn't care for that kind of work. Let's see, those of you that have been out Old Altamont Road, you get out to Mountain House. and there was kind of a motorcycle gang hangout place there. And that was owned by this lady's father, Mary Zimmerman. Her father ran the Mountain House Tavern and hotel for many years. And then a nephew then eventually got this, and he was an interesting guy. He owned the Trevarno Motor Court, and which I don't know exactly where that was, but somewhere I assume by Trevarno Road. That most of the family was buried at the Oaknell Cemetery. And see, the next house is kind of interesting, and there's different information on this house. What I originally found out was it was owned by Laughlin Moy. Now, he was a sheep rancher out in the Altamont area, and some say actually all the way out towards Carnegie. So wherever he lived, it said that he actually moved this house then to Livermore from Midway, which again is on the other side of the Altamonts. And if you drive by this house, let's see, what is that? 7th Street. If you drive down 7th Street, you'll see there's another addition behind this house where actually two little houses were joined together. So whether, but there's another story that another one of the old time families owned it. So we've got to do some more research there. What's kind of interesting is that his Laughlin Moy's wife was Catherine Rowe, and her sister was the one who married James Concannon. And the Dr. Gordon house, the big house that's out at Concannon Winery, was dedicated then to the sisters, Ellen Rowe Concannon. But again, a neat little house. And I think if I remember right, this one has a basement. So a lot of the old houses had basements. Okay, moving down the street a little bit farther is the Kelly house. Now you'll see that, and you see it even now, that a lot of people that own property out in the country have either cattle or sheep or whatever, live in town. And Kelly was certainly one of them. He owned sheep and he raised cattle, but he lived in town. And this is another house that was built by Carl Rasmussen. And let's see, Kelly was married to Mary Ann Gallagher, and again, part of the old Gallagher family.
If you guys are curious on hydropathic treatment, Sally did answer the question in the Q&A. So she gave a good description of what that is.
Okay. But were you just immersed in water, or were you actually shot with water?
In her case, it says there were 20 tubs. She worked at Napa State and said there was 20 tubs of what we know as a jacuzzi. And she said the only difference, the patients were put in a tub filled with water and the jets were turned on. The patients were strapped in by a tonneau-like cover across the tub with just enough room for their heads to be outside. And the treatment would go on until the patient became docile. Treatments ended when psychotropic drugs came out.
Yeah, my wife remembers when she was in nursing school, they spent some time at Agnew State Hospital in San Jose. And she said, yeah, the patients couldn't get out at all. They were physically restrained. Okay, we're almost done. We stop here at the corner of K and 4th Street. And this is the old Presbyterian Church. And it goes back to 1874. And you'll notice now the front door is on 4th Street. Originally, when it was built, you can see the front door, or the main door, was on K Street. And then it was all redwood. Years ago, I was in the basement of that. There was a coal chute, and I went down there. And the church was built on 12 by 12 redwood beams that went the entire length of the church. one piece of redwood that it sat on both sides. So, and I understand that they came from the hills of Oakland when there were a lot of redwood trees there. And by the front door, then there's a plaque that tells about the church. And again, most of the houses we looked at today, there's plaques then that tell about the building or the home. Okay, the last place we're going to look at isn't there anymore, and that's across the street from the Presbyterian Church, and across the street from the Carnegie Building, right on the north west corner of 4th and K, was this really, really impressive building. And it was built for Dr. Cameron Graham Gordon, who was born 1854 up in Ontario, Canada, and who actually went back to Canada, died in 1933 in Manitoba, Canada. And this is the house that I said that was called the Ellen Rowe Concannon Victoria house, the Victorian house. This is said to have been the first house in Livermore that had a bathtub with running water. And Dr. Gordon then lived in Livermore. As far as I can tell, he only lived here from about 1890 to 1897. Now, when you go out to Concannon's, you can see this thing we've been talking about before. Here's the front door where the family and friends went in. And here's the side door then to the office, the doctor's office over here. So again, this building's in really good shape. Exterior, it's my understanding they haven't done anything to the interior. I may be wrong, but that's the last I heard, that the interior is not going to be updated. But we'll have to find out about that. And here's what the house looked like. Right along here then is 4th Street. And then over here then is K Street. And you can see, except for the paint scheme, you can see the house looks just like it does now. Okay, now, if you have any photographs of the old churches, the old homes in Livermore, boy, I'd really like to get a copy of that, and we'll get that in the files of the Heritage Guild. If you know anything about Sears kit houses or any other kit houses, I'm super interested in that. So if you could let me know about that. And then if you know about some houses that you think are pretty interesting that we ought to research, please let me know about those too. So thank you for going on a walk with me.
Thank you, Richard. Hey, I have a quick question. So where do you do, or where do you get most of your research? Where are you looking up these houses? And is that something that anyone can access if they wanted to do some research on their own?
Well, when the Heritage Guild is open, which of course it isn't now, and I don't know when it will be, hopefully by mid-year, maybe, I don't know, that we have the old tax records from town. So if it was in town, we could figure out pretty well when the houses were built, because we'd know what the taxes were, and then all of a sudden they would jump in valuation, say, oh, that must be about when the house was built. And then another thing that I find very interesting or useful is Barbara Bonshaw. She was a Livermore librarian years and years ago, but she, in her spare time, and she must have had a lot of spare time, she went through all the old Livermore newspapers up until I think about 1964, and she made it on index cards. She put down then information then that she thought was of interest about fires, accidents, different people, and so on. And you can get a copy of that, I believe. You certainly can see it. And I think when the library reopens, you may be able to even purchase copies of a CD or DVD that has all that information. So once you see that, then it'll tell you what newspaper she found that, and even what page and what column she found the information. So that's extremely useful. And then, of course, another thing is there's still descendants here in town of a lot of the old families, and they've been really nice donating pictures, family histories, genealogical charts, and so on. And so that's been really good, and some really great stories. Some of them I don't think we can even tell, they're so good.
Just a couple quick things real quick. So there's a question if we'll be able to replay this. So we did record this morning's talk, and so what we'll do is post it to our LARPD YouTube channel here in the next couple of days, I would imagine. And it looks like in the chat, Amy Sams put a link to some Sears Archives homes by date. So we can forward that along to you, Richard, as well. And then there's a last question from Lisa that asked if there's a map we can use to do their own walk to these homes. There was a slide in your presentation. Would you be able to share the presentation?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Let's see. Now, what I did not do, oops, trying to roll this up. Doesn't want to go that fast. Well, let me, there.
I can always email it out. I'll email it out with the link. Oh, there you go. You got it.
So here's the route, but what I didn't have, and there's not really good room to do, is I didn't mark where the buildings are. But if you follow the path that we took today, you'll go right by these houses. And again, when you're walking, look down at the concrete and see if you can see those concrete marks. A lot of them go really, really back. I mean, to the early, very early 1900s. And again, Jay Morris made a listing of those, but he didn't put exactly where they are. He put what block they're on, but not in front of what house or what building. Unfortunately, again, I think most of them, the concrete marks were at the corners, and those were destroyed and taken out when the sloped sidewalks were put in. But yeah, we've been asked. In fact, I got a call yesterday that somebody would like a map. Now down at the Heritage Building, let's see, there's it's all on the floor here. I don't know if can you see this at all?
No, not
okay, well that's not going to work. But down at the Heritage Building, the Carnegie Building, there's a map and a little description of many of the houses. There was an open house in May of let's see, when was it? It was quite a few years ago now. And they did a really great job. And then there's another one called Historic Downtown. So these are all downtown. And again, we hope to do a talk in January at the library. Forget what the date is, but the middle of January through the library and the Heritage Guild. And maybe we can do something like this for the LARPD also. I should make a map like this for our walk that we just did. Mm-hmm. And I'll try to do that and try to get it to you then.
Richard, you are receiving lots and lots of praise and thanks for your wonderful presentation today. There is a question about Trevarna Road, and I think that's going to be a separate thing coming up, isn't it?
Yeah. We hope I won't be doing that. Susan Canfield, who actually lives on Trevarna Road in the manager's house, She had planned to give, I think, a walk for LARPD, didn't she? Or was it the Heritage Guild? I think she was going to give a walk. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting buildings there. And hopefully in the spring sometime that can be given. And she was going to give a talk, I think, at the library too. But of course, that didn't happen.
We did have a walk planned, and we did have to be between the Heritage Guild and LARPD. We had to postpone it until COVID loosens up.
Okay.
But
yeah, Susan would be a great one.
It will be very interesting.
Yeah, she knows that area inside and out.
Yeah.
Yeah, she'd do a great job. And she also leads the downtown walks for the Heritage Guild.
She does a great job too, full of lots of trivia.
Yeah.
Just to add authenticity to this discussion, I am broadcasting live from Trevano Road at the LARPD office. So.
Oh, are you? Oh, super. You're kind of historic.
There you go. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us, Richard, and we really appreciate it. It's so fun to learn more about the rich history of Livermore, and yeah, it's been a blast. And like Kathy said, you've got lots of praise coming through on the chat and in the Q&A. So we're like I said, we'll send the link out to all the participants for the YouTube video once it's available. And yeah, thank you all for joining us. Hopefully we'll be able to do this in person real soon, but we'll see.
Yeah.
That would be great. Okay, thank you so much, Richard.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yep, thanks everybody for showing up.
All right, everyone, have a
See you
safe
later.
and happy holiday.
All righty, happy holidays.
Bye.